The built-in C operators that you've learned so far aren't very useful for handling strings. For example, suppose you'd like to know the length of a string variable. Let's examine a piece of code where we use the function sizeOf on a string stored in a char array. Let's compile and run this program. You might be surprised that the size reported by this program is 10, not 6, the number of characters in Monday, or 7, the number of characters in Monday plus a null terminator character. On an array, sizeOf always gives the number of bytes occupied by the array. It is actually a compile time operation. It doesn't look at the contents of the array at all to determine the size of that array. So sizeOf is not the way to determine the number of characters in a string. Nor, by the way, is sizeOf useful to determine the length of an array if that length isn't known at compile time. A common mistake made by students is to try to use sizeOf in a function that was passed an array as a parameter. Getting back to strings, here's one more example why built-in operators aren't useful on strings. Suppose that you have two strings, S1 and S2, with values mon and day, respectively. And you want to concatenate them together into a larger string of Monday. Using the plus operator won't work. As you learned in the pointers and arrays videos, the name of an array evaluates to the address of its first element. Therefore, S1 plus S2 simply adds two pointers together. It has nothing to do with string concatenation. Fortunately, the C standard library contains many functions for working with strings. Among other things, C's string functions help us determine the length of a string or concatenate two strings together. To use the C string functions, we must include the string header file in our program. This header file contains function prototypes of all the C string functions. One of the functions we can now use is strlen. Here's the prototype for strlen. Strlen returns the number of characters in the string S, not including the null termination character. Size t is simply an unsigned integer type, and you can treat it as an integer. Let's compile and run this new program. Now the program produces the desired output. Strlen counts the number of characters before the null termination character.